Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Israel Unplugged. This is Josh Wander from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. I'm here with my co-host, Rabbi Moshe Lichtman from Beit Shemesh.
Yes, hello. A little bit of a sad day, a sad week, but we're going to try to liven things up and Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, serve Hashem with joy.
So Israel Unplugged is where you get the unadulterated facts of where we're holding in the redemptive process, focusing primarily on the ingathering of the exiles. I say that every week. I say that we are involved in the unadulterated facts. And when I say that, sometimes those facts are pleasant, and sometimes there are tragedies that happen. And we are right now coming off of a week where we had a national tragedy, and we're going to speak about that national tragedy. We would like you to also be involved in discussing it. If this is a live show, so you can call in. If you're in North America, your number to call would be 301-768-4841. Again, 301-768-4841. And if you're here in Eretz Yisrael, the number is 02-650-0151. 02-650-0151. We encourage you to call in with your comments. We sometimes see Israel in positive, great, joyous times. And in fact, generally, this month is a very joyous month. It's a month that we have Pesach, and then we have Yom Ha'atzmaut, and we have Yom Yerushalayim that's coming up. We have Shavuot, and we have Lag BaOmer, that it says in Halacha that people are noheg tzat simcha. People are accustomed to have a little bit of happiness during that day as well. This is a happy time. What could I say? This is generally a happy time of the year. And unfortunately, during the tragic event that happened this past Thursday, we witnessed the largest civilian death toll in the modern Israel history. So it's something that we are grappling with, and it's something that we need to discuss. It's something that is traumatic, and it's something that's good for our souls. And we want you to join in, so stay with us.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
So welcome back to Israel Unplugged. Again, this is Josh Wander. I wanted to mention, because we forgot, that we have websites that are worth looking at. One is Rabbi Lichtman's website, toratzion.com, and my website, which is itstimetolive.com. Both of those are worth a look. We have a YouTube channel with lots of videos. We encourage you to sign up, to subscribe, and to press on the notification bell. Thank you very much. Now back to our subject at hand, our very painful subject. On Thursday, everybody is, I'm sure, has heard about the news of this terrible tragedy that happened here in Israel. It's a tragedy that will be remembered forever. Like they say, that this day will live in infamy. This is a day that was the largest toll, a civilian toll, casualty toll in Israel's modern history. And I have had the occasion to be at a number of the funerals of the people that were killed during this incident. I have also had the opportunity to interview friends of mine that were there, that were first responders, at the event. And before we get into the gruesome details, I just want to give some historic perspective on this. And that is that if you look, what is Lag BaOmer? What is this holiday? This is not a holiday that is mentioned in the Torah. It's not a holiday that is they mentioned, even a rabbinic holiday. It's not mentioned at all. It is a custom that has come out in recent years, in recent centuries even, due to the fact that there was a plague of sorts, a spiritual plague that affected the students of the famous Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was one of the greatest teachers of the Mishnaic period, and he had thousands and thousands of students which died during this time because they didn't properly give the respect that was meant to be given one to the other, and therefore they were dying out during this period. And it's a time of mourning, even though it's also at the same time, parallel to that, it's a time when we're counting up from the Passover holiday up to Shavuot, and it's actually a time of happiness in that way. It's also a time of mourning. Now that dying off of the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped on a certain day, which was the 33rd day, according to some. Other people say it was during it wasn't necessarily this 33rd day, but it was on a 33rd day that the death stopped, and therefore we have a custom that we have a little bit show a little bit happiness during that time. There's some mourning customs of mourning that we perform during this time. We don't get haircuts.
We don't listen to
many
music.
People don't shave. We don't listen to music. Exactly. We don't get married. All these things are during this first period. But when they stop dying, we are allowed to start that again. There are different customs. We won't go into it right now. Now, Rabbi Akiva had 5 students, and one of those students was the famous Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
Maybe you should just mention that he had 5 students after these 24,000 died.
Correct.
So
he
that
was left with only.
He started over again, which is actually very interesting. I'll just interject. You know, when you think about it, why are we so happy that the dying stopped? You want to know why the dying stopped? Because there was no more students to die. They all died. Why should we be happy on that day? My rabbi asked this in synagogue over Shabbos, and he answered very, very simply. He said, what we're happy about, or what we're celebrating, is that Rabbi Akiva had the wherewithal to not give up and to restart. As the Talmud says, that after these 24,000 students died, he started over again and these are the 5 students that you're talking about right now.
Correct. And one of those students is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is most well known. It is attributed to him that he was the author of the famous Zohar, the Kabbalistic work of the Zohar, and he revealed the secrets of the Torah, which is supposed to lead to the ultimate final redemption. Now, on this day, there has arisen a custom amongst certain groups. It's interesting the way that this was created. It was originally it was more amongst the Sephardic Jews that used to go up to Meron, to where the cave and the burial place of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is located, and then eventually the Hasidic groups started to join in, and today basically all Jews are accustomed to make their way up to Meron. Jews of all persuasions, I should say, make their way up to Meron, and they have a very large party, and they have music, and they light bonfires, and it's all a lot of fun. Now, there's a lot of questions about this holiday. It's something that doesn't make me very popular. I believe that honesty and integrity is something very important especially to the Jewish people. And we have to be honest about this so-called holiday, that this is not actually a holiday. We have to know what the sources are. We have to know when it becomes disproportionate and it starts to get blown out of proportion the way it has over the years. And this is something I have to reiterate. This is not something that I would just say because of the terrible tragedy that happened this year. I've been saying it every single year, that this is something that is in some ways not inappropriate. Because it is not in the halakha. It's not brought down in Jewish law, and it's not something that we are not permitted to create new holidays. And if if it wasn't the fact that a famous rabbi from 200 years ago in Pressburg, known as the Chassam Sofer, wrote it himself, then I wouldn't dare say it. But he writes himself that one of the things that was discouraging him from coming to Israel was this practice, and he said if he comes to Israel, he would completely get rid of this practice of going to Meron and creating this new holiday. And additionally, he says something even more extreme, and that is that there was a terrible earthquake that affected the Jews of Tzfat. It wiped out the city of Tzfat, and he attributes that earthquake to the fact that the Jews in Tzfat did not give the proper honor, the proper respect, the proper position to the holy city of Jerusalem, and therefore this earthquake happened, a terrible tragedy happened. Now, I'm not suggesting, on one hand, that this tragedy that happened this past week is because of that, although I have a lot of questions. In fact, there were flyers that were put out, to my disgust. There were flyers that were put out that used the words of the Torah that said Visham Na'aleh V'neira'eh, that over there we're going to go up and we're going to see the words that are used for the holy temple, for the Beit HaMikdash, that we go up 3 times a year on our holiday to the Beit HaMikdash, to our temple, and that was the wording that was used in these flyers to describe the festivities that they were going to have in Meron. This is very questionable again. Now, that having been said, I have to make it clear, and people say this by the Holocaust also, that it's such as a tragedy of such proportion that we can't ask any questions. We just have to accept. I think my personal view is that Hashem doesn't just do this, right? God doesn't do this for no reason. Obviously, there is a lesson to be learned. You can everybody can have their own idea what that lesson is. It could be a personal lesson. It could be a national lesson. But if we ignore the lesson, then we're missing why did these people die? The whole purpose of these people dying, not the purpose, but was to send a message. Hashem is sending us something, some sort of sign that we're supposed to learn from. And if we ignore it and we don't learn from this, is going back to the Ema Bani Smecha that we've talked about many times. This is what Rav Teichtal was saying. If we ignore the lesson that was learned here, then we missed the whole point of the Holocaust. We can't ignore it. We can't just say it just happened, and we just have to accept it and not ask questions of why it happened. So without getting too much into details, the why, I just want to say that this is something that is dangerous. It's something that it's always been something which I consider dangerous, to have such a large crowd, and for not a good reason. If you have such a large crowd coming to the temple, coming to Jerusalem to bring the Karban Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice, so be it. So maybe it's worth risking a little bit your health in order to bring all these people together. But for such a minor tradition, to risk one's life and to go
and a relatively new one. It's not it's like as you pointed out, it's not like centuries old. It's not like since the time of the Talmud. It's very, very recent. And this is not to discount in any way the terrible tragedy and the lives that were lost. These were holy people, and like I said, it's become more and more of a trend over the past years, that it's become amongst all different groups and persuasions amongst Jews, that it's just been something that's acceptable, that we think it's part of Judaism, that people go to Lag BaOmer and Mass and they start have these festivities. So just to make it clear, we have to get back to the sources. We have to get back to what the Torah says and understand what is right and what is not right. And we have to say it's the way it is, and make sure that such a tragedy never happens again, and God willing, it will never happen again. Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I would just add, that I've had these thoughts also before and after, and it's. We do have to, though, have some humility and understand that there is that aspect of which, I've heard many, many times said over in the last few days, that Vayidom Aharon, right? When Aaron's sons died, so it says that he was silent. And we do have to be silent, certainly in the beginning. But we, on the other hand, and certainly we cannot say for sure that we know why this happened and, start blaming people. We're not. That's not what we're doing. That's not what you're doing. I know that's not what you're doing. God forbid that, that we should think, first of all, that we know everything and that we know the answers, as if we know God's plans. But on the other hand, like you said, we do have to some degree, learn lessons and make sure that these things don't happen again. And I totally agree with you on that point.
So I also we'll speak on after the break. We'll speak a little bit more about this, and then we'll go into some more hopefully happier discussions. Please stick with us.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Tamar? She's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yona. And yes, I can be all of those things. But at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Shalom, I'm Leah Aharoni. Join me on my show, News from the Torah. Each Sunday, we'll use the weekly Torah portion as a prism for understanding the news today. Listen to News from the Torah to gain clarity about the times we're living in and to understand your own spiritual path in the process. News from the Torah every Sunday on Israel News Talk Radio.
So we're back. We're talking about the horrible tragedy that happened this past week. I just want to mention a little bit about what I've done as a result. I wasn't there at the event, but I have been involved. I am a first responder. I'm a volunteer of the United Hatzalah and MADA and Zaka movements. And I've had the opportunity to speak to friends and close friends that were there, and did manage to attempted to treat the victims. They did treat and save a lot of people that were there. And I was at a number of funerals, also one of which I was at last night of a very special American boy that came to yeshiva here in Israel and tragically was perished in that event. And I was saying offline that I don't think I've ever been to a funeral in my life in which I saw family members having to comfort the first responders that were at the funeral. So the first responders, the ones that did try to do resuscitation on this boy, were so devastated. They were so broken that there was nobody to comfort them except for the family themselves. And it was heart-wrenching. And likewise, I had these interviews with friends of mine that were there from the Zaka movement. And these are, you have to understand, just again some background. The Zaka movement is an international organization that deals with the respect of bodies after death, people that die from unnatural causes, and they deal on a day-to-day basis with the most horrific scenes. Whether it be a tragic a bus bombing, a terror attack, a suicide, a car accident, all sorts. I mean, the most graphic things that you can imagine. These people, and I'm talking about people that are veterans of decades of seeing this, and they are completely broken. This is something that was just beyond their comprehension. They were there, and they just could not grasp that in 1 second so many people perished. They say there was no blood. There was this dead bodies everywhere, and they just couldn't. Their minds couldn't. They couldn't wrap their heads around what was going on, and they still can't. A lot of them need psychological help now. Them and their families are going through a psychological therapy now because of what they went through. So it didn't only affect the victims and their families; it also affected the first responders and their families. And as we mentioned earlier, this is something that is to the credit of the land of Israel here in Eretz Yisrael. We are one nation, and unfortunately, it takes these type of tragedies to bring us together in the way that it does. But whenever there's a tragedy, whenever there's tension, whether it be a war, whether it be a calamity like this, really the country does gather together. I'm just reminded right now of two events that are seared into my head. One is the story of a soldier named Nachshon Waxman that was kidnapped by Hamas and was tortured and killed. While that was all happening, the nation gathered together, unified together to try to pray for his welfare. And the other, of course, the three boys that were kidnapped in Gush Etzion. And again, these kind of tragedies are really what brings the country together and shows that we are indeed one nation.
No doubt about it, and it is definitely part of being in Israel. It's there's a beautiful idea from the Zohar. We're talking about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So the Zohar says, we say it in our prayers on Shabbat afternoon, Mi ka'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz, right? So simple understanding, if you ask anybody, they would say it means that who is like your people Israel? We're talking to God. We're saying, who is like your people Israel? One nation in the world. Goy echad ba'aretz. Ba'aretz means throughout the world. We are a unique, singular nation. But the Zohar says no, it means goy echad ba'aretz. We are a singular nation and a unified nation only in the land of Israel. The land of Israel unifies us. It is the great unifier of the Jewish people. And even though we have so many disagreements on so many issues, especially now politically, there's such a balagan. I don't know how you say that. So we're in such a mess politically in terms of trying to form a government. But everybody got together.
Such divisiveness.
Yeah, divisiveness, exactly. There's where everybody came together. There were too many people who wanted to donate blood, and we're talking about in completely secular communities. There were lines to donate blood, and they had to turn them away because we have enough, And these are people who, if they would see a Haredi Jew, they would argue with them, and they would, maybe say some not nice things to them. But when it comes to, it's one of these ideas, in outside the land of Israel, let's put it this way: everyone puts on the facade. Everyone puts on the facade. They're nice to you. I'm talking about the non-Jews, right? They're nice to you and everything. But when push comes to shove, they're not your brothers and they don't really love you. But here it's the opposite. Here we feel so comfortable because we're family together that we can yell at each other and we can, call each other names. But if one of us, God forbid, has fallen or is in trouble and needs help, every single Jew here would help his brother because they understand that we are one nation and that we are brothers. Brothers can disagree, but we're still brothers.
I always try to impress upon people, I'm not sure people understand, that when, God forbid, something happens and somebody is a victim, let's say, of a terror attack, unlike in, let's say, the United States or any other major country in the world, where you have so many people that are really unrelated. In general, you should know about the Jewish people. This is more about the Jewish people than Israel specifically. I try to tell my kids they don't get it. So if we're in an airport anywhere in the world, and we meet another Jewish person and we sit down and start speaking to them, within a minute or two, we're going to find some sort of connection. The Jewish world is so small, and the religious Jewish world even more so, that you can't sit with another Jewish person and not have some sort of connection, a blood relative, a close contact. And they think the whole world's like that. And I try to explain to them, if a non-Jew in the world happens to be in an airport and meets another non-Jew in the world and starts speaking to them, the chances of them having any connection whatsoever is just they would never have any connection. How would one person have any connection to another person? But here, any Jew, literally any Jew in the world, meets another Jew anywhere in the world, and all of a sudden within minutes you'll find connections. And even more so when you're here in the land. When something happens, and there's let's say somebody is killed. If somebody is killed, either you know that person, or you know a person that knows that person, or worst case scenario, you know somebody who knows that person. I mean, it doesn't go more than that. I mean, that's the three circles basically, encompasses the entire land. So when something happens, especially on this kind of scale, those circles are not just those ripples are not just happening, affecting the people of Meron or the people in these communities where these people came from. It's affecting everybody that is in the land, and everybody is in mourning. That's why they called for a national day of mourning, because it's not like again 9/11. 9/11 was a horrible tragedy that happened in the United States. But how many people would you meet on the street in America that knew somebody that was a victim in 9/11? I would very few people, I would say, that actually knew somebody personally. But again, in the Jewish world, and specifically here in Eretz Israel, everybody knows somebody or knows somebody who knows somebody that was a victim, and therefore those circles are very small, and they affect very deeply everyone that lives here in the land.
Right, and even people who weren't actually victims, but who were there, like. One of my cousins, who was actually not religious, called me, which I thought was so beautiful. She called me and said, she's so worried. Did any of your children go there? It happens to be that my son is the type of person who would have gone there, and thank God, he didn't. Thank God. So I said, no, everything's fine. And then all of a sudden I remembered, and I can't believe I didn't remember before she called me to remind me, that we have first cousins. I have first cousins. My mother was not Hasidish, but her brother was Hasidish, and all of his children, most of his children, live here in Israel, and they're Bayaner Hasidim. So if you know anything about Lag BaOmer on Har Meron, Bayaner is the one. The Rebbe of Bayan is the one who lights the main fire, and it's like a religious obligation for them to go up to Meron and to be with the Rebbe and etc. So I immediately said, oh my God, what about them? And I called my cousin, one of my cousins, and he didn't answer right away, but he called me back and he said, no, thank God, we're all okay. They were in a different section, and plus they had already gone. They had already left. They had already gone to what's called the Tish, to be with the Rebbe. So they were all safe, but they were there. They could have been. It could have been them, and it could have been my son. My son could have gone there. It was just like sort of a fluke that he decided not to. So. It's as you said, we're all one big family, and we all have to care about each other, and we all have to live together. And this is a topic of our station, of our program. I mean, that we encourage Aliyah, and one of the reasons we encourage it is that we should be together. Families belong together. We shouldn't be apart. It shouldn't be that half the family is living abroad and half is living here where we belong. And people always say to me, so I'm one of 4 siblings and I'm the one who moved to Israel, so I should go with the majority. And the answer I always give is no, I'm the one who's doing the right thing. It's my siblings who have to learn from me and do what's right and come to live in Israel. And so we hope that all of you will take that message, and we'll continue this right after the break. Don't go anywhere.
In a time where feelings have become fact, where rational thought and common sense has disappeared, one man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobiker, your political hitman.
Political Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Israel on We're going to shift gears a little bit here. We've been talking a little bit about depressing news, and now let's make it more upbeat and talk about what this show is about. We're talking about the ingathering of the exiles, about the signs that we are in the throes of the redemption, of the ultimate redemption of the Jewish people back to the land of Israel. And it brings me to an idea that we find in this week's parasha, which is an extremely important aspect of this whole topic. And that is, in the second, we read two parashiyot this week. In the second one, Bechukotai, the bulk of it is what's called the tochacha, which means the admonition. It's very, speaking about what we spoke about before, it's very depressing verses, full of threats and punishments that will come upon the Jewish people if we don't keep the Torah and the mitzvot. But then in the middle of it, there's this verse that says, I will make the land desolate, and your enemies who dwell in it will be desolate upon it, which sounds like just another one of the punishments that God will give us. In other words, that he will kick us out of the land and he will make the land completely desolate. So the rabbis, however, see this actually as a silver lining in the very dark clouds of the exile. And they say as follows: this is a good measure. It means that the Jews will not say, now that we have been exiled from our land, our enemies will come and find satisfaction on it. Because if you think about it, that's what happens throughout history. When one nation is conquered by the other, the conquering nation takes over. That's it. There is nothing left of the conquered nation. They are assimilated in, they're either killed out, exiled, or assimilated into the new culture, and that's it. And the conqueror takes over the land, but says our sages that's not what's going to happen, because the verse says, and your enemies who dwell in it will be desolate upon it, meaning even your enemies who come afterwards will not find satisfaction in the land. God will make sure that the land of Israel remains desolate throughout the exile of the Jewish people, and that's for our benefit. Because if they would have found satisfaction and the land would have given its fruits to these people, to these enemies of ours, so then there would be no chance of us ever coming back. And this, we know, is a historical fact. It is known throughout history that the land of Israel remained desolate. And it's not as if people did not try to make it flourish. They tried very, very, very strongly, but it never worked. I'll just read to you the words of the Ramban, who lived in the 13th century, 14th century. So he says, the statement, and your enemies will be desolate upon it, is a good tiding. It proclaims in every generation that the land does not accept our enemies. And this is a great proof and promise for us. For you will not find in the entire world another land that is so good and spacious and was always inhabited, but is now in such a state of ruin. Ever since we left it, it has not accepted any other nation, and they all try to settle it, but are unsuccessful. And we know this up until the days of the mid-19th century. In the 1850s, Mark Twain, the famous American author, took a trip around the world, and he wrote a book called The Innocents Abroad, in which he describes each land that he visited. And when it comes to what he calls Palestine, because we know that the land of Israel was called Palestine ever since the Romans took over, and they wanted to erase the Jewish people's connection to the land, which they were unsuccessful in doing, thank God. It says, he writes as follows: of all the lands there are for dismal scenery, I think Palestine must be the prince. The hills are barren. They are dull of color. They are unpicturesque in shape. The valleys are unsightly deserts fringed with a feebled vegetation that has an expression about it of being sorrowful and despondent. It is a hopeless, dreary, heartbroken land. And then he talks about the far-reaching desolation that surrounds it on every side. And you know what? You think about, you read this and you say, what is he talking about? What is he talking about? Israel is one of the most beautiful, flourishing lands in the world. And the answer is because something happened between 1850 and 2021. And that is the Jewish people returned, exactly as God said would happen. He said that the land will remain desolate until it's time for the ultimate geula, the ultimate redemption. And then the Jewish people will come back, and all of a sudden the land will wake up. And that actually happened. This is one of those things that, you know, it reminds me of what Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan says. He says, other generations have expected the Messiah's imminent appearance based on the forced interpretation of one or two prophecies, whereas we are living through, he says, we are living through the entire range of messianic tradition, often coming to pass before our very eyes with uncanny literalness. This is uncanny literalness. This is exactly what the Torah says. But it goes one step further. It's not only that the Torah promises that the land will be desolate until the Jews come back, but it also says that that is the clearest sign of redemption. There is a Talmudic statement in Sanhedrin 98a in the name of Rabbi Abba, who says that the clearest sign of redemption is when the land of Israel gives forth its fruits in abundance, something that it hasn't done for 2,000 years. And here we are living at this time. And what is it all about? Why? Why is this such an important part of the redemptive process? Because the end of the verse that Rabbi Ava quotes is Ki karvu lavo, because the Jewish people are soon to come. You can't expect that the Jewish people are going to return to the land of Israel and not have what to eat. They need to be able to eat and survive. So that means the land of Israel has to first start waking up, reawakening, and becoming a flourishing land again. And then the Jewish people can come back. And that is exactly, word for word, without the slightest doubt, what happened in the last 100, 150 years. The Jewish people started coming back slowly, but surely the land started rejuvenating. And then Jewish people started coming back, first in the tens of thousands and the hundreds of thousands, and then in the millions. And, you know, this year on Yom HaAtzmaut, they always announce the new statistics of how many people live in Israel. If I'm not mistaken, the number was 6.8 million Jews. We're talking about almost 50% of the Jewish people live in Israel. And therefore, to deny that we are living through the redemption is to deny the most obvious facts and fulfillments of prophecy that ever happened in Jewish history. What do you have to say about this, Josh?
I think that this is the switch that needs to be that many of the Jews that are living abroad are lacking. That switch, the switch between learning. I may have said this story before. I once gave a tour to a bunch of Hasidic boys, yeshiva boys from Borough Park in Brooklyn. And after the tour, they said to me, Josh, that was amazing. They said, this is so real to you, it's not even a fairy tale. When they said that, it hit me like a brick. I said, I guess if you're living in Borough Park, so you have the three little bears and Little Red Riding Hood, and you have the Beis Hamikdash. It's one of those fairy tales that they tell you about. But for us that are living here and wake up in the morning and look out my window and see the Temple Mount outside of my window, this is not a fairy tale. This is reality. This is something that we're living through every day. We understand that the goal is close, and that we are active participants in the process. And those that are not here, often they just lack the comprehension. They just don't get it. They don't understand that we have the ability, for the first time in 2,000 years, to actually choose to be active participants in the process, and once that flips, that switch is switched, is flipped, then all of a sudden people start to say, oh wait, you mean this is actually happening? This is real, and we could be part of it. And if that's the case, then it's so obvious. Why would we want to be anywhere else but in Eretz Yisrael? If we are able to bring Mashiach, if we don't have to just pray and sit back in our shtetl and read Psalms and pray that one day the Messiah should come, but we actually could be active participants that make him, that help him come, that pave the way for the redemptive process to happen by being here, then it changes the whole reality. It changes the whole philosophy of how one lives as a Jew.
Correct. And this actually brings me back to something we spoke about before. We talked about how, making Lag BaOmer into a holiday bigger than it really is a problem. And the Khatam Sofer writes that, you can't make new holidays, etc. It's so funny that the same people, very often the same people who put so much emphasis on this Lag BaOmer holiday, they're the ones who shun and make fun of those of us who celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim, which we've made them into holidays because we believe that God has showed us the beginning of the redemption, and with Yom Yerushalayim, which commemorates the 6-day war, even a very serious step in the Geula process and the redemptive process. And if you're going to celebrate that, why not celebrate this? This is much more reason to celebrate the Etchalta de Geula, the beginning of the Geula of redemption, with the salvation that it brought, than something like Lag BaOmer. So we hope you enjoyed today's show, and we hope you will join us again next week. Hopefully next week I'll probably be by myself, and we'll be talking about, it is actually Yom Yerushalayim next week, but hopefully Josh will join us as a reporter on site because he will be in the Old City. So we'll see you next week.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicole Eko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.